Hello. Today I am doing my September wrap up. I'm going to try and whiz through it because I have 1 bar left on my battery, which I didn't realise, and I've got quite a few to get through, and I kind of just want to give you short and concise information. So this month I started my new bullet journal. I'll have to do like a little flip through at some stage because I was trying to do some like funky design with it, and then I kind of gave up halfway through the month, but I will catch up eventually and kind of continue on whatever theme I vibe with at the time. Anyway, let's get started. The first couple of books I listened to via the audiobook through my library app. The first one being Unlock Your Storybook Heart by Amanda Lovelace. This one is a poetry collection read by the author. The blurb just says, "When was the last time you stopped to take in the everyday enchantment all around you?" I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I read the first one I think in August, and then I kind of accidentally skipped the second one. It just wasn't available as an audiobook, but you don't have to read them in any particular audio. They're kind of just accompanying poetry collections with this sort of fairy tale theme. But this one was definitely more my sort of theme and vibe than the first one was, so I enjoyed it a little bit more. I found it a little bit more relatable to me, and I think I just generally had more of a personal connection to it. So that is 3 out of 5 stars. Following on from that, I read The Book Eaters by Sun Yu Dean. This one was recently released actually last year, I believe, and I think it was one of the Illumicrate editions. It says, hidden across England and Scotland live 6 old book eaters. This is a story of escape, a mother's savage devotion, and a queer love that will electrify readers. I was a bit disappointed in this one. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought just, very basically, it was a really good concept, really cool concept, but I lacked any sort of emotional connection for it. Then my first physical book of the month was The Book That No One Wanted to Read by Richard Ayoade. This one is another recent release. It came out last year too, and I really do like this actor, particularly in The Mighty Boosh, The IT Crowd, that sort of stuff. It says, have you ever wondered about how it feels to be a book? This is a story of a sadly neglected book. Can its destiny change when it meets the right reader? And I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it captured that marvellous quirk that the author has in everything that he seems to do, pretty much everything that he's known for. I smiled throughout the whole thing, and I really liked that it was kind of like an existential crisis and philosophy, but for children. So yeah, those were the first 3 books that I read at the beginning of the month. It's much later, I can only apologise. I ended up needing to go Asda whilst my camera was charging up, and then we had to do the bins, and we started looking around at sofas. It was just a lot, basically. So let's continue on with the next load of books that I read in September. To be fair, I think this lighting's better than the natural lighting earlier. Controversial opinion, I'm sure. So the next book was unfortunately a DNF for the month, and that was Bread and Circus by Ariadne Matthews. It was another poetry collection. It was more of like an autobiographical collection of poetry about the economics of class and its failures for those rendered invisible by it. So obviously I haven't given it a rating because I didn't finish it. I DNF'd it at like page 25, so some may say that wasn't enough to get into it, but I don't think the format helped for me either, because I was reading it off of my tablet and there was lots of different kind of mixed media, which was pretty cool, but the format I was reading on made it really difficult to read, like when they had loads and loads of tiny words on the page. It was just too much for my brain. So yeah, for me and my migraine-induced brain, the layout was just too chaotic for me, and I felt like they were topics that I wasn't really equipped to read about at this time. That's not to rule out any potential go over, but for now it just wasn't for me. So the next book was a very much for me book. This was the Amy McCall YA book club pick for September, and this was You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Vabren, and I absolutely adored this one. It's a YA horror that came out this year, published by Bloomsbury, and it's really small, but it actually kind of took me a little while longer to read than I anticipated. At Camp Mirror Lake, terror is the name of the game, but can you survive the night? Charity Curtis has the summer job of her dreams, playing the final girl at Camp Mirror Lake. Guests pay to be scared in this full-contact terror game as Charity and her summer crew react to scenes from the classic slasher film, The Curse of Camp Mirror Lake. The more realistic the fear, the better for business. But on the last weekend of the season, Charity's co-workers begin disappearing, and when one ends up dead, Charity's role as the final girl suddenly becomes all too real. If Charity and her girlfriend Bessie hope to survive the night, they'll need to figure out what the killer is after. But as they unravel unravel the bloody history of the real Mirror Lake, Charity discovers that there may be more to the story than she ever suspected. And I absolutely adore this one. I actually want to go back now and try Cinderella is Dead, which originally wasn't my sort of vibe, but I'm kind of intrigued, as well as the other series. I think it's a duology of This Poison Heart and The Wicked Fate, because I just loved everything about this, and I know it's much different. It's her kind of debut into horror, so the writing style might be a bit different and everything, but it's got me inspired to go back in her backlist. So I gave this one, as you might predict, a 5 out of 5 stars. I felt like that one was a given. Yeah, I thought it was a fantastic debut into horror, and as I say, coming from an author again who I've yet to read the other stuff from, who has done just like fantasy kind of romance vibes, it was interesting to see that flip of trying horror out and being such a strong one for a debut. I also felt like it created some really strong feelings of like sickness and anticipation as the scenes were kind of ricocheting up, drawing out that tension. Some of the gory scenes, it really affected me deeply, but in a really good way. I was uncomfortable, I felt sick, it was great. I enjoyed all the pop culture references as well, and some of the Easter eggs. I felt like some of the mentions of movies was kind of maybe hinting at things to come within the book potentially. Yeah, I thought it was such a cool setup for a story with some incredible characters to boot. Next up, a reread, and this one I listened to through my audiobook library service. This was Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass by Lana Del Rey. So I think the physical edition of it features 30 poems. However, the spoken word audiobook read by Lana Del Rey features 14 of those 30 poems, and it's also accompanied by music by Jack Antonoff. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say than this. I gave it 5 stars before and I gave it 5 stars this time. Beautiful, nothing really new to add. So I did a little bit of blended reading for this next one. I listened to the audiobook as well as read the digital copy, and this is Out of the Blue by Jason June, and this was LGBTQIA+ YA fantasy romance, and I absolutely adored it. It came out last year. It's a standalone dual POV queer rom-com, asks if love is enough to change everything you've grown up believing. And it's also dubbed Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas meets Deep Blue by Jennifer Donnelly. I haven't read Cemetery Boys, but I do have it on my mental TBR, and I do have a physical copy of it. Jennifer Donnelly's the series is a quartet called the Waterfire series, and I love those books. It's kind of like Percy Jackson but with mermaids. I adored those. I've actually just started selling them on Vinted though, just because they've served my purpose now and I'm kind of decluttering a little bit. But if you're interested and you want to give them a go, I think I've got them for like between £1.50 and £3 at the minute, all 4 books individually. So yeah, little shameless plug there. This I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. I just found it to be an incredibly delightful read. It was my first time, I think, reading fake dating as a trope, and I quite enjoyed it, especially with kind of like the magical twist at the heart of it, and with the magical twist of like the mermaids and all that folklore around it. I was happy that that was still kind of a main focus. Like, one of our main characters presented a whole PowerPoint presentation about merfolk and their lore and like fact and fiction and that sort of stuff, and I was like, yes, I'm here for that, because it so easily could have just gone the route of just romance with a sprinkling of, oh, those characters are mermaid and now they're not, but that was deeply embedded throughout it, and it affected other characters as well, which was really interesting. So I really enjoyed that, and I also adored all of the queer rep and body positivity. It was just amazing. Okay, I continued on with my Mortal Instruments kind of spontaneous read through. I had never read these before, but back in August I started off randomly reading through my collection of Mortal Instruments books, and I've been really enjoying them generally. So the next one was City of Fallen Angels, which I think is the 4th book. Yeah, book 4 by Cassandra Clare. So I did a audiobook and physical kind of blended reading. I forget who the narrators were for this one, but I think most of them had the same narrators going through, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I think a lot of people know all about the Shadowhunters, so for the sake of not spoiling it, because obviously this is the 4th in the series, and to not bore people that have already read this, because this series has been out since like, well, this one was published in 2011, so it's been out for a while. I'll just give you kind of my brief thoughts. So this one I ended up giving a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I was so happy to have a book focused on Simon, who I've been saying from the beginning is definitely my all-time favourite character in this series, and I'm just loving that he's still such a if not a major character, but an essential character, I would say, so far into the series, when he could have easily have just been written off as the mole that nobody really cares about, you know. Pretty much from the first scene that could have happened, but I love that he's hanging on, you know, and he's actually necessary. I felt like the main plot twist shocked me, especially following the ending, but it worked in my mind, like it all came together in a great way. Yeah, I thought this was a fantastic continuation. Next up, I read a book for review. I was part of the book tours for Black Tide Books, so thank you very much to them for gifting me a digital copy and taking part in the book tour. So this is The Popelink Massacre by Eric Butler, which is adult horror, and it's very dark, deep, disturbing. There are two types of people in Jefferson County: those who know the legend of the Popelink monster and those who believe it. Before the night is over, Sam will have no choice but to join the believers. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It was such a quick read, and I feel like it had almost equal parts character driven and plot driven, and with the characters in particular, we had such strong and varied personalities. We had a quite decent, like a biggish cast, but they were easy to follow. But what made it even more impressive was that they were so different, and they didn't just feel like basic, you know, carbon copies of each other. Yeah, some of the characters and their vibes fit the tropes, you know, classic tropes, but they didn't feel like gimmicky or cringy in that way, I suppose. The demonic themes of the goat head monster was terrifying, because behind all that violence and malice there was this really cruel intelligence behind there, which just made it really freaky, really frightening, because you also wondered how much was this monster understanding. You knew the monster was understanding a good deal, but also like why, like this, the whole thing, just, it really got into your head. But yeah, this was gory and gross, and I really enjoyed it, so thank you again. The next one was Weep Woman Weep by Maria de Blasey, and I think this was also Black Tide book tours. I've yet to actually do that one yet. I've read it, but my tour is at the end of October. So this is YA horror, and it says the women of Sueno, New Mexico don't know how to live a life without sorrows, thanks to La Llorona. In the battle for life, Mercy fights to break the chains of generational trauma. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I really enjoyed reading more about the legend of La Llorona. I feel like she has popped up quite a few times in a few different books that I've read throughout the year, which is kind of worrying. I feel like it might be a sign, but also I've just really enjoyed learning more about that lore, and the quite heartbreaking like legend behind it. I wasn't overly fond of the lack of distinct chapters that we had, because I find it difficult to pause and break when it doesn't have like that natural, that obvious break. And I also just feel like timelines start to blend. I felt like the writing was comfortable enough that it wasn't too much jarring, it wasn't too much of a block, so it kind of worked for this sort of stream of consciousness, I guess, style that they were going for. But yeah, I'm sure I'll talk a little bit more about that in that blog tour that I'm in at the end of the month. Then we have My Teacher Has Tattoos by Darren Lopez, and I think I was in the Hear Our Voices book tour for this back in, might have been August, you know, but it was more like a recreation, so I've only just read it, but it only took like a day. It's just a children's picture book, so it's very quick to get through. And in this one we are following Xavier, and in Xavier's neighbourhood, tattoos represent gang membership. So after Xavier catches a glimpse of his new teacher's tattoos, he learns that there's more than meets the eye. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and I just found this to be an incredible delight, especially being an educator with, you know, tattoos. So I felt like it was handled so beautifully, and it was just a great way of explaining what tattoos can be for an individual and what they can mean if they mean something, you know, and also kind of trying to destigmatise that, especially in an area like Xavier's neighbourhood, where it's stigmatised as criminals and, you know, bad people, but the shocking fact that his teacher has them, and oh my gosh, teachers aren't supposed to have them, you know. So I really enjoyed that. Okay, continuing on with the Mortal Instruments book 5 is The City of Lost Souls. The blurb for this one was, I just kept it short: what price is too high to pay, even for love? This one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars, and it was probably my least favourite of all the books. There was just too much going on, and I got so confused with which plots I was following. They kind of just bled together, even though they were very distinct and they were kind of happening with, you know, main characters, side characters, main and side characters together. It was just too much of a hot pot going on, and I feel like we needed to sever some of that and just have a few different main things to follow to keep it concise and straightforward. Yeah, I know it was definitely an important book, but it was just very overwhelming, especially with the abundance of threads that were weaving together. As I said, the different plot points were from side characters as well, and I thought it was great that we got more main character energy from side characters, but it was too much going on at once in one novel, and it was quite a hefty book as well, so it was, my brain just couldn't comprehend what was going on. Okay, next up, All the White Friends I Couldn't Keep. Hope and Hard Pills to Swallow About Fighting for Black Lives by Andre Henry, read by the author. I listened to the audio narration for this one. This was also released last year. So it's about a leading voice for social justice, revealing how he stopped arguing with white people who deny the ongoing legacy of racism, and offers a proven path forward for black people and people of colour on the history of non-violent struggle. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and I really liked that it added a personal touch to the movement, particularly from the author's perspective with hate crime within America, experiences within relationships, you know, especially like interracial relationships, and kind of comparing how he felt and kind of external feelings to his interracial relationships, how the other person in that relationship felt, and the differences and similarities perhaps that he felt within same race kind of relationships. It was just really interesting thing to kind of look at and see something to discuss, and also just a discussion on true allyship and what that actually means. I really enjoyed it. Okay, so last physical book for the month. I realised when I talked about Amy McCall's book club pick for September, and I was talking about You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, this was actually August, but I carried it over like to the first couple of days because I hadn't finished it in time. So yeah, this one was actually August's pick. The September pick for Amy McCall's YA book club pick was Anna Dressed in Blood by Kendall Blake, and I really enjoyed this one. It's YA horror, and I have been wanting to read this for the longest time, honestly. I remember having it in my mind like years and years and years ago. But at that time I was just scared of everything, and at that time I just thought no, I wouldn't be able to handle it. But I have watched a fair few horror movies now. I have read more horror, and I think I'm getting a stronger stomach and kind of muting the fear and upping the enjoyment of these things now, so it was perfect timing. But I will say I was still pretty scared. So yeah, we're following Cass Loward, who is no ordinary guy. He hunts dead people like Anna Dressed in Blood, a beautiful murderous ghost entangled in curses and rage. Cass knows he must destroy her, but as her tragic past is revealed, he starts to understand why Anna has killed everyone who's ever dared to enter her spooky home. Everyone, that is, except Cass. So I ended up giving this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I think it was equal amounts horror and atmosphere for me. Like, they balanced quite beautifully. The tension was pulled at the correct moments. Like, the gore there was really gory, and I was watching the live discussion after every book club pick. They do a live show, and I was watching this and they said it was interesting because a lot of the time ghost stories kind of forgo the gore and the gruesome bits, and I was like thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, that's actually kind of true. Like, you don't get a lot of straight up ghost stories that includes pure gore. It's usually psychological, jump scares, that sort of thing, not someone being torn in half like a character was in here. I won't say who because I don't want to spoil, but it was intense. Yeah, I really enjoyed that, which is a strange thing to say. I also really liked how serious Kaz was about this profession, but it was quite sad really when you saw how much of a backburn life had for him, and he's the living one. Like, he's killing ghosts, sending them on, whatever you want to call it, and he's foregoing his life really. He doesn't have any friends, he doesn't really throw himself into high school life, he doesn't really think about his future, what he wants to do. It's just this, and that also stems from kind of trying to seek vengeance and building up his stamina, strength, skills to face off the ghost that killed his father, who's also a ghost hunter and died at the hands of one that he was hunting. And so he has a lot tied into it, but it was just really sad to kind of see him not being, you know, a young person his age, and just, I don't know, all about death and murder and ghosts and things. It was just sad, but also I appreciated the dedication at the same time. In terms of the romance, it was a bit too insta love for me, but it was tender, it was sweet. And again, from listening into the live, so I can't remember who said it, but someone said it was nice for Anna to have that because she was murdered, you know, when she was going to her first and last dance. She didn't even get a chance to go to the dance, have any romance, have it like a first kiss or anything like that. It was taken from her. So from that point of view, it was quite beautiful, really. Also a bit strange still because she's a ghost. I'm like, dude, come on, we need to get rid of her. She's a ghost. This is what you do. You get rid of ghosts. Why are you know, doing puppy eyes at her? But also that point was quite sweet, and equally so for Cass. Like, as I say, he was so invested in this like ghost killing career. He didn't really have much of a life, you know. He's not really experienced those things. He's aware that he has charms, that he's good looking or whatever, but he never really explores that side of him. He kind of, which is kind of awful, he uses it, and his mum says this as well, uses it to get to where the ghosts are. So he'll find like the prettiest girl in school that seems to be the queen bee, and he'll get like the information about where the ghosts are, what's all the laws, what's the legends, but that, like, he doesn't actually explore true friendships, true relationships, that sort of thing. So interesting. Okay, and then lastly, wrapping up the month with the completion of the Mortal Instruments, I read, purely listened to actually, City of Heavenly Fire, again by Cassandra Clare. It's narrated by Grant Cartwright and Eloise Oxer, and this one is kind of like the epic showdown between shadow hunters and demons. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and although I had like a lesser connection overall as I was feeling with the 5th book as well, it still had me super invested, especially with how everything would all wrap up and end, how epic in proportions things were feeling, like the scale of everything. I feel like Simon certainly stole the show a bit, but I was having so many emotions when this particular Simon scene was going on. I was like, oh my god, what? Because I think at the back of my head I still was thinking, he's just the little mortal that nobody really cares about, throw him away, even though he was my favourite. But I was waiting for one of the characters to be like, what are you even doing here? Which, you know, he did get a fair bit of that in the beginning few books, but still, for him to have such main character energy was just the best. And also the worst. But yeah, the last 20% in particular really took off, and it just, everything, I think I had to listen to a few pieces a couple of times, because at first I was like, I couldn't comprehend what was going on. Second, I couldn't comprehend what was going on. And third, I just needed it to sink in. But yeah, that is it for this wrap up for September. Do let me know what you've been reading, or what your favourite book was maybe of the month, and I shall catch you in another video soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.